talk to you initially about the problem as we perceive it for the procurement function, some of the problems that the procurement function is facing. We're going to propose a possible solution. We're going to then talk just briefly about this specific customer situation. So the solution that I'm going to present to you today is actually a solution that we developed for a customer. This is just the prototype, and obviously the data in this is just dummy data. And it's obviously we're taking out logos and everything. But this is actually a live. This solution it was developed for a real customer and a real customer need. So just to give the background on their problems and their situation, and then obviously what happens afterwards, or how we manage to solve some of these problems for them. And like I said, then at the end I'm going to spend hopefully most of the time on actually showing you the solution and some of the things that we've implemented there. Right. So some of the growing pressures on the procurement function, and I'm sure this is a list that most of you probably agree with. This is obviously, I'm sure you can also add to this list. I think especially in times of recession, which luckily we are now just in the process of coming out of, but then even more there's a pressure on the procurement function to optimize costs and make an impact on the bottom line. I think the awareness that procurement has an important role to play there is becoming ever more important. So obviously, therefore, then there's a pressure to deliver as well. At the same time, the complexity in supply chains keeps increasing because of global supply markets, so it becomes ever more complicated to generate the transparency that you may need or that you need to make good business decisions and well, basically to deliver on those promises or those demands that are asked of you. Need for faster decision making and more timely information. That's certainly something that, with the advent of more and more business intelligence solutions, I think is becoming more prevalent because for a few years, obviously, the concept of business intelligence is not very new. It's been around for a few years, and more and more companies are picking up on it and implementing good business intelligence solutions. And so, therefore, one of the benefits of those solutions, obviously, is to have a lot of information, either in automated reporting or in for analysis purposes, really at the click of a button and in a single source of truth sort of database. So obviously top management becomes accustomed to some of those processes and therefore requires them of other departments as well. So I think that's something that procurement, from what we find, both in Germany and in the UK, procurement functions are asked this more and more as well. Obviously, to do your job well and to deliver those savings and to gain this transparency that you need information from other business functions as well, because obviously procurement is a function that's embedded within the overall process. So you need information from sales, you need production forecast, you may need warehousing information if warehousing is not indeed part of the procurement department. And typically, especially in larger organizations, we find defragmented data landscapes, which means that you may have different source systems, you may even have a single source system as Oracle or SAP or other Microsoft ERP systems, maybe Navision. However, usually within those systems there are different modules in which the data is kept, and we like to call this data silos, because within those silos you've got the information from that module, but not necessarily is it always possible for those different modules to speak with each other. So what happens is that you'll get the information out into Excel and combine it there and do something manual with it, which obviously comes with certain drawbacks. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. Increasing requirement to manage contracts efficiently and to make use of favorable price clauses. We're currently in a conversation with a large manufacturer of turbines for airplanes. And as you can imagine, they've obviously got lots of supplier contracts, and that's historically grown. And there are all sorts of price clauses in there. However, if you haven't got the transparency to know what well, which market developments really to try and keep an eye on, because if the market moves in this direction or in that direction, that might actually be favorable for you, and you could then invoke one of those clauses to obviously drive down cost at the end of the day. If you don't have the transparency to know where you have those clauses and what they say, then obviously it's difficult to make use of these clauses and therefore derive the benefits from them. I think, like I said, this list is not exclusive, and I'm sure all of you could add a lot to it. These trends are set to continue, though, as the procurement environment is becoming more complex. The supply chains are becoming more global and even more multi-tiered, and information demand is going to be quicker all the time. So I think we're only going to see these issues become worse at the end of the day. So what could a business solution do, business intelligence solution do? So for example, how useful would it be for you if you knew your top suppliers by value, by number of purchase orders, for example, across different commodities, maybe something like a KPI like on-time deliveries, if you knew something about price reductions, negotiations, how many have you done, what did they say, what did they result in, and all of this obviously not in 15 different Excel sheets somewhere, and you need to find the most current version, but rather in one dashboard even, or in one automated report that you have at the click of a button. Or for example, what is your demand? I said earlier that obviously one of the most important pieces of information that you need is you need to know the demand from your operations, or from what the production demand is. So therefore, obviously, you need to know that by month, maybe even by week or by day, depending on your operations processes, whether you do just in time or things like that. Then obviously you need to know it very, very precisely. However, I think what we all find is that there's a plan, and then there's reality. So even though you get this plan that was drawn up at the beginning of the year or of the quarter, for example, we tend to find that changes quite quickly. And obviously, again, the same problem. If you don't know of any changes, and you don't know if you can't find out about those relatively quickly, then you're in trouble. So you want this information available, I think, quite quickly and readily available for you. Another question, obviously, where can I achieve a better price for my materials? I think equally important at suppliers that fulfill all my criteria. So especially large organizations, there's usually some kind of evaluation process or accreditation process to go through. So obviously you need to know, can I actually buy from this supplier, and where would I be able to procure my materials more cheaply? The next question that you want to which suppliers can I switch capacity much cheaper? They have 5% capacity left, and they can't. So I can't switch all my demand to them. So that's obviously also a very relevant piece of information that you'll need to make a good decision. Another thing is supply distribution across different materials and commodities. So basically supplier risk, and I think supplier risk goes both ways. It can either be, am I too reliant on my suppliers, i.e. do I buy too much of a certain commodity or material from one supplier, which would obviously make me, put me into a situation where they have maybe too much negotiation power. However, I think the other way around, it's also an interesting analysis to do, because some of the companies we work for example, one being Siemens, that we've done some work for, they've got this rule saying that they are not allowed to make up for more than 50% of any supplier's turnover, so that their suppliers are not reliant on them. There's obviously an ethical aspect to that, but there's also a very good business reason for that, because obviously, as we all know, there are peaks and troughs in demand, and one year I might have a very low demand for a material, and next year it may increase. And then obviously if the supplier didn't actually survive that one year because it was too aligned on me, the next year he may be gone, which will obviously pose a problem to me. So I think supplier risk with a typical solution that would be an ABC analysis, which I'm sure you're all aware of, something like that. But that goes both ways. And maybe a very, very personal question, why do other people that do the same jobs as me in other companies, why do they go home earlier than me? Why do I have to sit here longer and compile these reports or finish these analyses and sit over my Excel sheets all night long? Why? Which might look a little bit like this maybe. Why is that? What do they do differently than I do? Another question that maybe you might be asking yourself. So the answer to that is that a good business intelligence solution would be or can be instrumental in answering these questions. Obviously, there's other things to do. A business intelligence solution will not just the world would not simply become a better place, and you'll spend the rest of your days lying in a hammock at the beach. But obviously, it will help you answering some of these questions and get the transparency I think you need to do your job better. So at this point, I would like to ask you a question, and I would like to ask you if you or your team ever had to work late because maybe compiling a report or an analysis took so long because you had manual processes of data collection or manipulation. So maybe if you could give a quick answer to that, that would be great. Okay, so thanks for that. It says here 90% sometimes, 10% never. So I think that most of you can identify with these issues. And from the experience that I have having done this for many, many years, and I think you find yourself, I think that happens quite a lot. I did switch off my Outlook. I don't know why I'm still receiving emails, but okay. Right, okay, moving on. So just quickly on this before I'm going to talk about the actual solution and the situation that we found at this customer. So without BI, and I touched on this a little bit, usually what will happen is you'll get several source systems, whether they're SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, or whatever your source systems may be. Typically, you'll get the information out into Excel and try and do something with it there, whether that's an XLS, a CSV file, or pivot table, or whatever. And then on top of those, which is what you see at the bottom there, that's basically the reports or analysis you draw out of the data out of these systems. So obviously the disadvantage of that is it's file-based, which means one person will work with this, but it is on someone's computer or somewhere in a file where other people may not necessarily know about it. You'll send this via email. The data becomes inconsistent because obviously once you drew it out of the system, it is detached from the source data, so therefore it will not be updated or anything. The limited data models, so for everyone who's ever tried to analyze 3 or 4 dimensions, like say months, products, sales channels, and customers in Excel, you can appreciate how difficult that becomes because it's quite difficult to add more dimensions of analysis. Formulae are decentral at a spreadsheet level, which becomes quite difficult. Sometimes with historically grown Excel sheets, you may find a situation that nobody actually understands those formulae anymore. We actually had that problem with one of our customers, a large German mail order company at the time. Now they obviously go to online retailing, and they had two files, one with gross sales and the other one with net sales, and in between those two they basically lost a few million every time, but they couldn't find a fault because the formulae were so complicated. So basically they said, okay, we're just going to have to live with this effectively, which is obviously not what you want. Manual data consolidation, a lot of copy and pasting, and the data is non-verifiable because, as I said, it's detached from the source system. So the solution would be, what you see here is get the data out into a typically multi-dimensional database. A multi-dimensional database lends itself to analysis is much more performant than the relational databases that those source systems will have. And these three little letters that you see at the top there, ETL, they're actually very important. That's ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. So basically, you extract the data out of the source system, you transform the data as you need it. That's actually the clever bit, because that's where you combine data from different data silos and make it talk with each other to derive meaningful information, and then you load it into your database. And on top of that database, then that's where all your reports will sit. And the good thing about that is that they all derive their data from the same data source. So you have one single point of truth. That's where your data is being held. Everyone will talk about the same data. You won't have the situation where two people come with two tables into a meeting that should theoretically say the same thing, but they don't. And so you spend the first 10 minutes talking about who's got the correct data. That won't happen anymore because you've got one single point of truth. It's you've obviously got a multi-user ability that several people can use this at the same time. Data is centralized, I said that. You've got a multi-dimensional data model. You can easily include more dimensions very quickly at the click of a button. Formulae are held centrally. So for example, for KPIs, that's another thing that we find frequently, that one KPI may be defined differently across different departments, which obviously again makes it difficult to actually compare figures. Data is automatically aggregated, and the data is up to date and verifiable at all times because it is connected to the source system, so you will always have up-to-date data. Okay, so moving on to this specific example I want to show you, just so you understand the problems that they were facing. This specific organization has several buying centers, a couple of those in Asia, one in Europe, in Germany. And so basically, numbers 1 and 2, they had two different source systems for supplier prices for their suppliers in Asia and one in Europe. Like I said, these didn't speak with each other, they weren't connected, so basically what happened, they were sending Excel files around. Bearing in mind that we are talking about some 20,000 materials here that people are looking at, you can imagine that quite a lot of analysis to do in an Excel file, comparing those prices. So the third piece of information is a production forecast. Like I said, you obviously always know your demand. You need to understand what it is that you actually need, how much is going to be produced. And the fourth piece of information that was actually held in Excel in this case is obviously also relevant. You need to know, if I want to produce one machine X, how many nuts and bolts and wheels, tiles, welded parts, whatever do I need in order to produce this. So all of this information is obviously relevant. You need all of this in order to know your demand and to know to then be able to put the prices against that and to see if there's any savings to be made. So again, ETL, you see those letters, you saw them on the other slide. So we took all of this information, we extracted it out of those databases, we transformed it to make it speak with each other, make the data silos speak with each other, so they actually knew what is my demand, what are the supplier prices in Asia, what are the supplier prices in Europe, and to compare those. Obviously, the added benefit of this is if your production plan ever changes, because the little clock symbol that you see next to the ETL means basically that's being done every night. So if the production plan changes, the next morning you'll know, and the demand will be up to date again. The fifth thing that's actually very interesting. That's the little globe there in the left-hand corner at the bottom. Basically, I said earlier that it's all well and nice if you know that there are cheaper suppliers in China, but obviously you need to know their capacity, because otherwise you don't know whether you can actually shift your demand to some of these suppliers. So as JEDOX actually comes in two instances. One is in Excel, which I will show you briefly in a minute, and the other one being on the web. You can actually provide an account to suppliers where they can actually, against your demand, obviously, that will then be up to date all the time, where they can put in their capacities and even any prices that might have changed in case they want to give you better prices. So that's basically to round off the whole tool, so you can actually then really know, okay, there's better prices, there is a capacity, this is my demand, okay, I'm going to shift this. So at this point, just one other question before we go into the live demonstration. I think there's one more slide after this. So what I'd be interested to know is if you know this situation that you have different data sources, although it may be the same system, but different modules that are not interlinked within one system, for production forecasts, sales planning, purchasing prices, supply capacity planning, and the like. Right, okay, 70% yes, 30% no. Okay, so again, from the customers that we've seen, or from the organizations that we've worked with, I think that's actually pretty good percentage for no, because usually these tend to be in different systems. So for all of you that answered no, i.e. you have all of this in one system, that's actually very good and a good position to be in. Okay, right, thanks for that. We're going to go over this very briefly because I think we talked about this. So what were the problems? The users cannot access the necessary information quickly. Data collection is time consuming because it's done in Excel. The Excel files are actually very complex, so only very few people understand them. The data is not consistent because it's withdrawn from the source system. It's then put into Excel files, so there's no single version of the truth. Scenario analysis, very difficult to do. Users work with different KPIs, things I've touched on before. The planning process takes too long for demands and purchasing, and quick reaction to changes in the environment are therefore virtually impossible because everything takes very long. So as you won't be very surprised to find that these problems were solved. Otherwise, we wouldn't have put them on the left-hand side. So rather than reading that out to you, I'm just going to go into the presentation, into live demo now. So, like I said, we've got two versions of, or two ways you can look at reports in JEDOX, and you can use two interfaces, basically, also to use the data for analysis purposes. So one is Excel. So this is an Excel file. You can see here, I closed the ribbon bar, but you can see that there's basically just one more tab here at the top that says JEDOX. I think you can see it there. So basically that's it. If you install JEDOX on your laptop, you will work in a normal Excel file, and you will be able to use all the Excel functions, formulae, etc. that you're using, which is one of the advantages in my point of view for working with JEDOX. I think, I'm not sure whether I said it initially, but we are, our company is actually partners with different software companies, so we're not that biased. We work with different software solutions, and we've been working with JEDOX since 2008, as we said. And I think one of the key strengths of JEDOX is this fact that you have all the functionality in Excel. So people that use a lot of Excel really can use this very, very well. We'll see the web. The web interface is also very good, and I'll tell you why I think that has the strengths of that. But just to say, I think you can do everything that you want in Excel, and I think that's one of the key points here. Why this solution was very attractive to the respective company, because basically they were used to Excel, they knew the interface, they were familiar with it, and they thought, okay, that makes sense. I think we can get used to this quite quickly. Okay, so what do we see here? Basically, this is we call this the dashboard for the purchasing manager. Just so you see that this is also available on the web. I just want to show you basically so you can see that looks pretty much the same. I'm using a Firefox browser. You can obviously use any browser that you want. I'm using a Firefox browser, and I was looking for short-term car leasing, so I'm going to delete that. So what do we see? This purchasing manager is in charge of several commodities. You can see here quite a long list of commodities that are being purchased, and within those commodities there are a lot of materials. So altogether, I think we're talking about some 20,000 materials, roughly. They are interested in several different things. I'm just going to explain this because obviously otherwise it's all a bit of mumbo jumbo. I'm just going to tell you what these things mean. So I'm going to start with the PVO, that's the purchasing volume. As you would imagine, that's basically what they're buying now. So number of parts purchased multiplied with the price. Then cost analysis now. I'm just going to lead you through the process, and then we'll see that the purchasing volume cost analysis is actually different from the purchasing volume that we saw here at the beginning. Right now, this is the same because basically we haven't done this yet. Savings best, as you can, the name would suggest, savings you create if you buy all your materials that you're currently buying from the cheapest supplier in the network. So like I said, they have several buying centers. Several buying centers buy from different suppliers. And basically what the system does here is it compares the prices and says, okay, there is a cheaper supplier in the system somewhere. So in this case, we're looking at the site in Berlin. We've got, for the purposes of this prototype, we've got 3 sites. One is in India, Aurangabad, Shanghai, and Berlin. So looking at it from Berlin, there are potential savings of 329,000 euros to be had if we were able to buy all of our materials from the cheapest supplier in the network. And then obviously savings best, we haven't done that yet, so that's that. The TCO, that's an interesting thing as well. Basically, the rule is that they will only start really looking into the decision whether to shift to a new supplier or not if the list price of a potential new supplier is 25% below the current supplier. Because the rule that they have and their experience, what their experience shows them is that typically it's not worth it shifting otherwise, because there's things like customs, like maybe longer transport, quality issues. Basically, shifting to a new supplier has all sorts of administrative costs involved as well. So they'll only ever actually start testing this in earnest if there's a material where the saving is potentially higher than 25%. So obviously, that's a very interesting number. So in this commodity sheet metal parts, there's 212 materials that have a saving in excess of 25%. So where it would make sense to look into this more deeply and in more detail. You can see here machine parts even 412, so that's quite a lot. So obviously what the purchasing manager would do, I mean here obviously you can look at some other commodities, and you can see right now we're just looking at 1 month. Let's look at the whole year. The savings you can see here in sheet metal parts, there's quite a lot of potential savings. If you look across the whole thing, that's obviously a massive number. However, and that's why I think this cost analysis part is important. This is obviously a theoretical saving, because that means that we could shift all our demand to the cheapest supplier of the network, and as we all know, that's not very realistic. So the next thing that we would now do is, if we were the procurement manager, we would call our guy for sheet metal parts and say, Mr. Smith, I saw that we've got quite a few potential savings in sheet metal parts. Could you please have a look at that? What he would then do is to go to the potential commodity, start my Excel. So we've now got a view, we can now look at the potential for the commodity. So here you can see all the different parts. You can see that's quite a long line down here, down all the way. You can also look at the English description or in other languages, obviously, if just for the purpose of showing you that different languages obviously supported. I left it in German. So you can see there's obviously quite a lot of saving here, the potential saving here. In fact, the saving is so high that that really doesn't make sense. So I think what we can see is that there's obviously a problem with the data here. It can't be that the saving is that another supplier would only want 3,000, I think this is euros, for something that would cost us close to 3 million at a different supplier. So what's probably happened here is that the data from the other suppliers was quoted maybe for a single material, and the other for 100 or 1,000, or for a crate, or for basically just a different set or a different amount. So therefore, you can see that this obviously doesn't really add up. So that's something that you would look into. Basically, this is you killed 2 birds with 1 stone here, because you can already see that there's a data issue. So basically, this is a data cleansing tool as well. So you can see, okay, we need to update this because one of these 2 is probably not correct. In fact, if you look at the comparison between the purchasing volume for this Winkel and a Blech, it's probably likely that there's a problem in the purchasing volume number. So let's look at this one. Unterteil. That's 76%. That's actually that could be a realistic saving. So having gained an overview across their commodity, because obviously the individual strategic buyers are in charge of several commodities each, you can then go and look at the product sheet. So on the product sheet, you'll look at the different suppliers. So basically, we've got the different suppliers listed here with their respective prices. You can see that one supplier is quite a lot cheaper than the one Stereomat Elektrowärme. That's probably one from Germany. Not too surprising that they're expensive. So you can compare those here. Obviously, here those gray areas, you could then in those gray areas you could also change the part number and look at a different time frame. But we're just going to leave it at this and look at this one material, because obviously I just wanted to lead you through basically the workflow. At the same time, we've got the part demand. Like I said, we've got different buying centers, but we've also got different production sites. In fact, we also produce some machines in Shanghai. So there's a purchasing volume there, and there's also a purchasing volume best there. However, obviously, as we are in this example looking at it from the Berlin perspective, we're just going to be interested in the demand for Berlin. So purchasing volume best is 8,590. So savings best is 28,000. We could look at the product forecast just briefly and see, okay, what's the part demand? Obviously, on a month-by-month basis, we could see that. We could look at the diagrams and change those and just look at part demand. So basically, that's something, that's just gives us a bit more visibility. But I think we're going to be focusing on this to see what the potential is if we actually shift it to a new supplier. So in order to do that, we need to find out their capacity, because I mean, ideally, we just move everything to this supplier called Chatneel. The question is that actually possible? So in order to do that, I'm going to go back to the web interface. So I've actually got two web interfaces open, just so you don't get confused. I've got one where I'm logged in as the administrator, so basically I can do everything and I can change things as well. And the other one I'm logged in as a potential supplier from China, for example. So one thing that we've got here is we've got a workflow management overview. So typically in planning processes, what you have is you have different stages, i.e. the planning process hasn't started yet, it has started, someone's doing something, and they're finished, and you don't want them to do any more. That's actually quite crucial because you don't want numbers to change all the time. You want someone to input their data, and when they're done, you want this to be basically to be frozen and not to be able to move anymore. So this is what we see here. Right now, I've got all of, again, obviously this is just a prototype for demonstration purposes. That's why we've only got those few materials here. Obviously, normally you will have a lot more materials. So basically, this material needs to be updated. We're looking at the one with the 7005 at the back, the last four digits. So I logged in as a supplier. I can see here I can write. It says green. It says I can write. So I can actually input data here. I'm going to look at the demand for Berlin. So again, that's the same figure. It all is derived from the same database. And the data, if the data changes, it is updated all over the place. So we can see it, and we'll see that in a minute. People change something on the web. It is reflected back into Excel. So we will see all these things. All the data is derived from one database. So obviously now we're moving away from the field of what is classically termed as business intelligence, i.e. reporting and analysis, and we're now moving into the field of planning, which is something that is being termed corporate performance management these days. If you ask me, I think that's just a marketing buzzword. I think as far as I'm concerned, it's all still business intelligence, but then maybe you can call me old-fashioned, I don't know. So basically, but this is a different part. So this is looking ahead. This is looking into the future and writing back, technically speaking, into the database. So that's something that is one of the other key features of JEDOX that not every business intelligence solution actually provides. So therefore, we need this here, and I think that's one of the key things that you can do very nicely, for example, via the web. So for example, if you have different people in decentral places, even for an internal planning process, providing such an interface, basically a template for people to input their data, and they just access it via their browser, is actually quite an easy thing to do, and it's quite comfortable and quite good to manage as well because of these workflow processes. So basically, we'll stay in the example. I'm the supplier, or for the purpose of this demonstration, I've just logged in as 3 suppliers at the same time because I didn't want to log in and out at the same, all over again. So basically, I can just input data for 3 suppliers now, which is obviously in the real world wouldn't happen because I would only be able to input my own data. But for me as a supplier, it's obviously very important to know what the demand is, 930 if you remember. Here, the parts demand in Excel, it says 930. So basically 930.6, this is just, there's no digit up behind the point, but then other than that, it's the same figure. So we see here how this demand spreads out over the months, which is obviously also important. And here, this is a relevant information then again for the procurement person. So we're sort of mixing two views here, but I just wanted to show you everything. As I said, this is just a demo. So basically, if I now say put in, I don't know, for example, 700 materials are being supplied by Chabnil. In this case, because I've put it in the box that says all months, it's just being distributed evenly across the year. Obviously, I could also say, there's actually a wizard for that. I could say, please distribute 700 with the same distribution as last year, or with the same distribution as supplier so-and-so. So basically, there's all sorts of things. But for purposes of demonstration, I just did this. So basically, we can now see, okay, we've actually got demand. We've got demand here where there's still, this demand hasn't been met, or we still need more. So I'm just going to make up the 930, so we've got those covered. So let's say we've got 200 from this one, and then we've got 31 from this one. So basically our overall demand, we're just going to be interested in our overall demand now, is being met. So at the same time, like I said, I could theoretically change my prices. These are the prices that have been listed. If I, as a supplier, say, okay, I can actually give you that as a higher price, or I need to increase the prices slightly because your demand is, I don't know, otherwise I'm not going to be able to supply this. So you could theoretically update your price here. We're just going to leave it at the original prices, but you could change them. So now we see that we've got altogether a purchasing volume cost analysis of 18,918. I'm done now, so I'm going to say, okay, thank you very much. I'm done. I'm going to say promote. I'm getting a small message saying you successfully promoted. And as you see here, now it's actually switched to red, which means I cannot write anymore. If I click on here now, I can't even click in that field. It's locked. I cannot change this data anymore, which is, like I said, quite crucial because now the people that need to work with this data, they can rely on the fact that this data is actually correct and it won't change anymore. I said to you there's a workflow, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to refresh this. So now we see that for this one part, 7005, the last 4 digits, which is the one that we remembered, this is now gone to under review. So I can see, aha, okay, for this material, something's already been done. So I can now look at this because the data is done. In this case, we've just simulated a 2-stage process where someone else would need to approve this before it's signed off. You can obviously have a multi-stage approval process, as many stages as you want, or as few. So in the administrator view, I could now go back and say, no, sorry, this data is not good. We need to set this to level 0 again, and it's just going to go back. So now, if I press refresh here, I can write again, and theoretically I could put input data again, just so you see how that process works. Okay, so that's the workflow process where I can actually manage data input from external people like suppliers, but also from internal sources for planning or forecasting processes. This could obviously just as easily have been someone from my internal organization. Okay, so the final thing I want to show you now is 18,918 is the purchasing volume cost analysis. So I'm going to go back into this view that the strategic buyer has, and I'm going to press the refresh button, and lo and behold, now this number transfers over here. So now we can actually see, aha, okay, having done the analysis, having checked the actual capacities that we can use, it turns out the purchasing volume that we can really achieve is not as high as the purchasing volume best, which, as we said, was just a theoretical volume. However, it's still much higher. It's still much better than the purchasing volume now. So basically, the savings cost analysis would be 17,000 euros. So I think that's really what I wanted to show you. I just wanted to show you once, basically lead you through this process that a typical procurement person might go through, and how they could derive from just at this very high-level overview of having seen, okay, there are 212 materials here that we need to look at. Why don't we start with that? Then looking at the potential for the commodity and just picking out one, going into the product sheet, looking at it in more detail, finding out, okay, there is obviously a potential, and then asking suppliers to give that capacity to come up at the end with a, well, a relatively firm savings figure that you could now go back and communicate it to your superiors, obviously just for this one material, but and that's obviously something that you can then work with and also track and monitor against. Right, okay, so looking at the time, I want to just jump back quickly into the presentation because I think I've got 2 more slides. So one question, having seen all this, I'd be interested if, obviously if this was something new to you, or if you already have a solution similar to this, or if this is something that's interesting to you to that would add value to you. So do you have one or more solutions for these areas? We talked about production forecasting, sales planning, comparing purchasing pricing, and then also supply capacity planning. Okay, so we see quite a diverse field. 70% of you actually have one solution for that, so that's great. That's the basic. Integrated. 50% say several. I would have expected to see, because typically that's the only way we see quite a defragmented data landscape or a solution landscape. But yeah, okay, I hope I was able to give you a quick overview of how maybe some of these issues could be integrated into one tool. So to summarize, and this is my final slide, so don't worry, no more slides after this. To summarize, we answered 3 questions. First of all, optimize prices. Data from different source systems was compiled into one. You could do the comparison and analysis quite quickly and efficiently. The optimization potential was presented, and you could do further analysis. So basically the question was, where can I buy the cheaper price? The second thing is, you know your demand. Data from production planning is intermarried with procurement data and updated frequently. So if your procurement plan changes, your production plan changes, this will be reflected in here. So you can know your exact demand per site and month. Obviously this was all they needed at this point. You could obviously do it at a lower level, weeks or days even. So you know your theoretical optimization potential. And then in the end, the final one was know your supplier's capacity. So you could actually, you know how much you can shift to whom, and you know under an overcapacity where you need more materials, and obviously the workflow that I showed you that supports these processes. So at the end of the day, you answer the question: what is my real optimization potential, and is my demand being met? Hopefully, a solution of this will enable you to go home at a decent time while there's still daylight, and maybe beat some of your peers to it. So yeah, I think that's really what I wanted to show you. Thank you very much for your attention. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Yes.
If not, let me just say one last thing. There are going to be further webinars on procurement-related topics, so we'd be happy to keep you informed about those. And obviously, there's other material also that might interest procurement professionals.
Hi, Chris. So, Christian, thank you very much for the demonstration of your procurement solution. We have 3 questions. First question is, how long did the budgeting process take before and after the solution?
Well, the budgeting process was dramatically reduced, as you won't be surprised to hear. It basically took weeks before, and with this, it can be reduced theoretically to a matter of hours or days even. But I mean, we are working with people, so I mean, the process that I showed you, where I just input 800, 130 or whatever I put in, that obviously can take days because people may want to do their own calculations and they want to go back to it and to check with someone and think about that. So I think the factor that will cause this to take longer is still people at the end of the day, because only once they push the button and say I'm done is that stage of the process done. But theoretically it's a matter of days.
Okay, thank you. The second question was, how much could your customer save with the solution?
Well, we've seen a theoretical optimization potential. I think that says something like 100 million. That obviously is not. That's obviously not realistic. I think a saving in this. I think in this particular example, I think a saving of at the end of the day between 15 and 20% across most commodities was realistic. Because obviously there were some materials that were already bought quite cheaply, but for some of them they actually achieved some substantial savings. So I think about 15 to 20% is probably realistic across some of the key commodities. You saw some commodities where there wasn't that much potential, so that probably wouldn't apply. But okay. It's quite substantial.
Oh, the return of invest is then pretty fast, I would say.
That was I think the amortization period, which was their KPI that they needed to get this investment, was a matter of months.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. The last question: how long did it take to implement?
Well, I think the biggest problem with this, I mean, basically the front end, the reports and all that you saw, that takes a few days. That's not that much. I think the biggest issue was, to be quite frank, was the data sources, because in this organization, which had different databases, one in Asia, one in Europe, unfortunately, the people that actually owned these databases, they didn't it was their realm, and they didn't want to share. So just getting access to that data, we had to escalate that issue quite high, and that honestly took months. So before we basically had all the data that we needed and had access to all the data, that took months. So obviously, if you had all of that available, this could be done in a matter of a few weeks.
Okay, thank you very much. This was the last question. Finally, thank you very much, Christian. I think you could show us that with implementing a BI and corporate performance management solution in the procurement area is pretty substantial, because the savings are really high and the return of invest is very fast. I think we could show you that reaching these results, you must have a solution which not only can do the reporting part, which also can do the write-backs or the budgeting and planning part, which is crucial to achieve these results. So thank you everybody for joining our webinar. We have 12 o'clock. That's just in time finished. I hope you received a lot of valuable information, and looking forward to see you again next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.